federal government reinstates commitment to revamping the rail sector as part of measures to open up the economy.
Walter Onoge sworn in as Nigeria's new Chief Justice.
You assumed this position at a crucial time in the history of our nation. It is a time when all arms of government have suffered loss of confidence from the people of this nation.
The Senate asked the Nigerian custom to halt intended clampdown on dealers and owners of vehicles with irregular paper.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we pose the question, cocoa again?
All right, let's tell the story. Once upon a time, in 1988, the story was told of how an Italian firm dumped ships of containers laden with hazardous waste at the cocoa port in the then Bendel state. Now, cocoa is a farm in Ishakiri community, now in Warri North local government area of Delta State.
Exactly, Claire. Now, the Italian firm brought in massive sludge and other cancer-causing chemicals, which resulted in the contamination of aquatic life and various degrees of illnesses, including cardiac and respiratory diseases, and ultimately in the death of some residents within the community, including Chief Sunday Nanan, on whose land the toxic wastes were dumped.
Quite correct, Kingsley. Of course, many of you might be familiar with the rest of the story, but just as a reminder, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which also investigated the outcry of residents of the community then, confirmed that the shipment contained, and I quote, most dangerous poisons, and quite a number of them, a highly proactive material. That, again, according to the investigation carried out by a Japanese atomic research agency.
Now, almost 30 years after the first cocoa incident, the town is in the news again, obviously for a similar reason. Now, last week, the story broke of another suspected consignment of toxic waste deposited in the same town, this time by a company owned by Nigerians, or a Nigerian-owned company which manages oil waste. Only that, as the allegation goes, this time around, not an Italian firm, but a Nigerian firm. Now, the allegation is that the company brought in and buried the substance, that's the toxic substance, at a dump site owned and operated by the company.
Indeed, Kingsley. There's so many stories, making the rounds about what has happened so far in cocoa. But of course, the accusers also claim that after scientific analysis of the sludge and slurry, it was discovered that the environment around the area in which the waste was dumped was found to be highly toxic and dangerous to health. And of course, have gone ahead to write to the Federal Ministry of Environment, of course, to come to their aid, Kingsley.
That's right. Yeah, for intervention, obviously. And we will, of course, in the course of our conversation today, begin to examine aspects of the latest dump of toxic waste in cocoa. That's the town in Delta State. But as it happened in 1988, this one, of course, is unlike what happened in 1988, this is different. In 1988, the initial tip for the story came from Nigerian students who were in Italy, who saw a small report about an Italian company, shipping toxic materials to Nigeria and dumping them in part of the old Bender state. And then the newspaper, that's The Guardian, then picked up the story from there, and all hell was let loose. Of course, it then led to the creation of what was known as FEPA, that's the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. It was a story that, of course, caught eventually global headlines, including Time magazine at the time.
Eventually, the Italian firm had to come to collect
that's right. They had
their property.
Yeah, they had to clear the toxic waste, took them to some other location and had some remediation work done on the site. So is this cocoa dump Number two, what?
Promises to be an exciting and really, really serious discussion. And of course, like we said, that's the prompt for our conversation today on Good Morning Nigeria. We have so many questions, and our distinguished guests, of course, will be here to examine all sides to the issues and probably prefer how best to guard against a recurrence. I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak, and from the depth of my heart, I welcome you to today's edition.
Well, a number of questions, Claire, you've already indicated that we, of course, will have to examine the veracity of what's going on around the toxic waste dump said to have been placed again in cocoa, as well as whether there's been a failure of oversight by the appropriate agencies. The guest, of course, will be taking a look at some of those issues. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I join my colleague Claire in welcoming you to today's edition of the program. Coming to you, as always, live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, that's the NTA. In the course of the program, we'll come up with our regular complimentary segments, including newspaper review, business, and hopefully sports. Arsenal, of course, beating beyond recognition last night.
Kingsley, Kingsley, don't worry, Arsenal will bounce back. I'm a
well,
fan
that's
of
right.
Arsenal.
After conceding 10 goals home and away.
Well, not a good season for Arsenal.
Stuff happens. But Real Madrid, of course, through to the last 8. Let's go over now to the newsroom, and here's Lydia Bassi with the morning news. Hi, Lydia.
Hello, Lily.
Good morning to you all. Welcome to the news segment. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo has emphasized the present administration's commitment to revamping the rail sector as part of measures to open up the economy towards achieving developmental goals. The acting president will disclose this at the groundbreaking ceremony of the Lagos-Ibadan rail project in Lagos. Said the project will also generate employment for thousands of Nigerians. He added that upon completion of the project, this will ease movement via the rails, thereby reducing the impact of vehicular activities on Nigerian roads. The Lagos-Ibadan rail project is one of the several projects completed under the Buhari administration. Justice Walter Samuel Onogen has been sworn in as the 15th indigenous Chief Justice of Nigeria. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo, who performed the ceremony, challenged the appointee as head of the nation's judiciary to live up to the expectations of the high office by upholding higher morals and ethical standards at all times. He said the mere perception of judicial malfeasance and questionable delays will not only poison the waters of justice, but also defeat its essence. The acting president therefore called on the Chief Justice of Nigeria to ensure that justice delivery is truly just and fair to all.
It is a time when all arms of government have suffered loss of confidence from the people of this nation. And it is so also with our judiciary. It is a time when my Lord and justices of our courts are called upon to resuscitate that confidence that the people of this nation want to have.
Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogen, who thanked the president for finding him worthy of the appointment, promised to keep to his oath of office in the interest of democracy, rule of law, and good governance.
I'm out to make sure that the integrity of the judiciary is not only restored but sustained.
By virtue of his new appointment, Justice Walter Onogen was conferred with the national honor of Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger, GCON, by Acting President Yemi Osinbajo. Justice Onogen from Cross River State was born in 1950 and became Justice of the Supreme Court in 2005. In another development, the Oba of Benin, Oba Eware II, has hosted the Acting President Professor Yemi Osinbajo in his palace. The visit was part of activities for his engagements with oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta region. Bukola Orubusi reports that major issues bordering on the development of the state were raised during the visit. Meanwhile, the All Progressives Congress, APC, has congratulated the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, as he clocks 60. The party noted that Professor Osinbajo has demonstrated a high level of loyalty and commitment to the change agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari and the party, saying his wisdom, vigor, and innovativeness have been essential to the numerous achievements recorded by the administration. At 60, APC noted that Professor Osinbajo has recorded several landmark achievements as a man of God and man of the law. These accomplishments, the party says, have no doubt shown through as he holds forth for Mr. President. Similarly, the Senate President, Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, and Speaker, House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, while congratulating the acting president, prayed God to continue to give him good health and enduring grace to serve the nation. And the Senate has asked the Nigerian Customs to halt its intended clampdown on dealers and owners of vehicles with irregular papers. The decision followed a matter of urgent public importance raised by the Deputy Senate Leader, Bala Ibn Na'ala, who described the intended clampdown as unwarranted and obnoxious.
The Senate do hereby resolve to direct the Nigerian Customs to stop all actions regarding the implementation of the said circular until it appear before the Senate Committee on Customs to explain in details the purport of the circular to the Nigerian public.
Not even the National Assembly itself can impose punishment on some offense that was committed many years ago. It cannot happen. If you cannot do that, the custom cannot do it either.
You now say that the person who bought this vehicle without any fault of his own, without knowing how the vehicle was imported, and paid for it, and you say that today you are going to mount checkpoints and block the roads to seize people's vehicles.
The House of Representatives has passed for second reading a bill for an act to amend the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Act. It also mandates its Committee on Financial Crimes to carry out an inventory of all forfeited assets, with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to ascertain their legality, conditions, and values.
Justice, other than depriving the state of its money and then the money goes to another source.
And now to aviation. The runway of the Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport, Abuja, will be shut down for rehabilitation by midnight of Wednesday, March 8, 2017. Through a press release from Public Affairs Department of the Federal Ministry of Transportation, the public is thereby notified that the airport remains open for operations until the midnight of Wednesday, March 8, 2017. The statement also says the government has concluded all arrangements for the complimentary transportation of passengers to and from Kaduna as soon as the Abuja airport shuts down operations. For security reasons, however, initial screening of passengers and luggage will be done at the Abuja airport, while the boarding screening will be done at the Kaduna airport. The Minister of State Aviation appeals for public understanding as the decision to shut down the Abuja airport is in the interest of all. The right to know, as enshrined in the Freedom of Information Act, is a powerful means for Nigerians to demand good governance and accountability. Anti-Corruption Program Manager of the Department for International Development, Emmanuel Uche, stated this at a seminar for ministries, departments, and agencies.
The Information Act that we're talking about today is very, very critical and necessary to make sure that we do not do public probes for the purpose of public probes.
The whistleblower policy of the federal government is an excellent one. We strongly support it, but they should take a step further to ensure that they join the vigorous campaign and advocacy for the passage of the Whistleblowers Protection Bill.
Under the OGP, which Nigeria just signed on, capacity is key. And that is one of the ways we can strengthen this law.
That's the news at this hour. The program continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt. But remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
All right, we seem to have some good news coming from the business sector, but this is what it is. The Naira is expected to further appreciate against international currencies, but that is in the parallel market. And Central Bank of Nigeria is assuring of continued forex market liquidity. Kulu Mohammed takes it from here.
Nigeria's external trade value stood at 5.28 trillion in the fourth quarter of last year, compared to 4.78 trillion in the previous quarter of 2016, according to a data released by the National Bureau of Statistics. Total export was valued at 2.98 trillion, compared to 2.43 trillion in the previous quarter. Total import, however, fell to 2.31 trillion in the last quarter, representing a decrease of 6.1% from 2.46 trillion in third quarter. However, total trade stood at 17.34 trillion, more than the 16.3 trillion recorded in 2015. Total exports for 2016 stood at 8.53 trillion compared to 9.59 trillion in 2015, while total imports stood at 8.82 trillion compared to 6.69 trillion in 2015. As a result, the country recorded a negative trade balance of 290.13 billion naira in 2016 compared to the trade surplus of 2.895 trillion in 2015 and surplus of 8.92 trillion in 2014. In 2016, crude oil exports accounted for 6.99 trillion, while the non-crude oil exports accounted for 1.53 trillion, according to National Bureau of Statistics. The much faster rise in the value of exports relative to the rise in imports brought the country's trade balance to 671.3 billion naira during the review period, showing a stark improvement from the negative trade balance of 136 billion naira recorded in the preceding quarter. The Central Bank of Nigeria continues its intervention in the interbank foreign exchange market by selling another $367 million to meet forward requests by customers. The Apex Bank says the move was in line with the bank's determination to ease the foreign exchange pressure on various sectors through forward sales under the new flexible foreign exchange regime to keep the market liquidity. Last week, the Apex Bank intervened in the foreign exchange market by selling $180 million on Monday and another $350 million on Friday in a bid to sustain the appreciation of the naira in the parallel market. The interventions were followed with a directive to banks to process foreign exchange demand for travel allowances by their customers without any hindrance. It further mandated banks to process and meet the demand for travel allowances by end users within 24 hours of such applications, as long as the end users meet basic requirements already outlined in earlier directives. An expert debunked speculations of non-availability of the released funds.
Oh yes, it is really available.
But there are some certain conditions that our customers are supposed to meet that were not there before. Like right now, the whole idea is to ensure that it is channeled towards the purpose for which it is meant for. For example, in the case of school fees, now we have to pay directly to the school. This wasn't the case before.
With this development, the Naira is expected to further appreciate against international currencies as the Central Bank of Nigeria assures that measures are being taken to ensure sustainability. And for the latest closing figures on the floor of Nigeria Stock Exchange, here is a graphic summary. That's business news at this hour. I am Kolo Muhammad.
Thank you very much there, Kolo Muhammad, for the business news. Next for us is a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Bayo Atebe is already here, and of course we welcome him as usual. Bayo, good to see you once again.
Thank you. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Kinsley.
All
Good
right,
morning, Nigeria.
Let's begin our review this morning by going over to the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph has a pretty busy front page this morning. Above the nameplate of the New Telegraph, Senate orders customs to halt policy on vehicle verification. And immediately below that, 500,000 jobs underway as Oshibajo flags off 458 billion naira Lagos-Ibadan rail project. Details of the story can be found on page 31. Now, the lead story says PDP bows to Sheriff with 3 riders. Reconciliation Committee submits report to him. And Dixon, Sheriff to conduct June 30th convention. And party leaders ready to visit Buhari in London. Details of the story can be found on pages 2 and 5. Now, we have another window of headlines just below the name flag. Ex-NNPC GMD, that's Andrew Yakubu, slams 1 billion naira suit on EFCC and AGF. AGF stands for Attorney General of the Federation. Forex. CBN injects fresh $100 million into market, that's on page 30. And police officer slaps corps member for punishing student. Details on page 8. Oshibajo to CJN. Restore confidence in judiciary. And below the photograph of some Nigerians who have been recently deported from Libya, DPO's abductors demand 20 million naira. With 2 riders, further stories, 13 policemen in hiding after mob attack. And robbers raid bank, kill policeman and others. Details on page 8. That's a siege on the police.
All right, let's quickly take a look at the front page of this day newspaper. It has an interesting, of course, development. Talking about the economic growth. It says that the federal government is, of course, targeting 7% growth by 2030, and that's under a new development plan. It calls the, of course, National Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. There you have it there. Of course, you can see all the riders there. It is to raise oil output to 2.5, of course, well, you can see there, implement market-determined, forex rate regime, and so many riders, of course, on the front page there. Also, Senate is to order customs to suspend verification order to motorists. That story is trending, of course, on the inside page, enjoying a front page mention this morning. Now, just topmost beside the nameplate, UK, Jonathan, and of course, well, government did not reject help to rescue Chibok girls. That's also trending. And Buhari congratulates Onohen as he sworn in, as he swears in CJN, federal government and China to also finalize, of course, business contracts on the Lagos-Calabar rail line. Now, that's the outlook of this day newspaper. Bayo.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Well, the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, marked his 60th birthday yesterday. Here is wishing him good health and successful tour of duty in service of our fatherland. However, he marked the grandly with two important national assignments. First, he swore in Justice Walter Onoge as the 17th Chief Justice of Nigeria. He also decorated him with the second highest honor in the land, Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger. However, he charged Justice Onoge to restore confidence in the judiciary at the crucial time in our nation's history. He says that all arms of government are in deficit as far as confidence of the public is concerned. He asked Justice Onoje, as custodian of and protector of justice and right, to be fair, just, and pursue truth. He observed that Justice Onoje is assuming duty when all arms of government are suffering a loss of confidence. I pray your tenor will meet the call of the time. That is, our justice of courts are looked upon to resuscitate confidence. He said, I discussed with President Muhammadu Buhari, and he extends his personal and good wishes and congratulations. So congratulations to the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Also at Lagos, the acting president performed the groundbreaking ceremony of the two-way fast-running Lagos-Ibadan railway line. It is part of the extension. It's called Segment 2 of the Lagos-Kano extension, which is supposed to be the standard gauge. He says the goal of government is to restore railway as both commercial and personal transportation. You recall that the Minister of Agriculture has deliberately instituted a policy of using railway to transport goods and services as a deliberate policy to reduce cost. He says it will create about 500,000 jobs and also facilitate movement of about 3.2 million tonnage of goods. Governor Ambode of Lagos was also there. He was very excited. He said the restoration of the railway will go a long way in movement of goods and save our roads from the hazards of trailers. The Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, says that the historic project is a priority of the administration, and his ministry is set to ensure that this is achieved successfully. The deadline for it is by December 2018.
All right, there's the other story we read. Claire also took that from this day, and it's here on the front page of New Telegraph. It relates to the Senate ordering the customs to halt the policy on vehicle verification. You know, the story has been making the rounds for quite some time now, that the customs service had given a 1-month grace to vehicle owners to regularize their import duty papers. And I mean, but motorists have been wondering, is it on the streets that you collect import duty?
Yeah, in fact, that was part of the argument in the Senate, that where were they when all these vehicles were passing at the border? And the custom is working on the principle is, when is a stolen item stolen? Is it at the point where it was stolen or any point where it is discovered? It's a matter of principle, but the Senate has put down its feet and they have summoned the custom to put a stop to that. And after meeting, I think they will reach a consensus about all the initiative is to ensure that vehicles that are supposed to have had duties paid on them at point of entry and have escaped are held to ensure that they pay. Whether that should have been done or shouldn't have been done is in the wisdom of the Senate, because they represent Nigerians, and they certainly must have been hearing cries from Nigerians who are objecting to this. And therefore, by the time they summon the custom authority to the Senate, a consensus will be reached. But meanwhile, it has been directed that it should be halted.
In fact, you know, the stories came up in the media. It's during the Christmas period. a number of motorists, were traveling to the east. Of course, they complain that you have so many checkpoints, sometimes up to 20, somewhere between Shagamu and Onitsha Head Bridge. They were being stopped and then asked for their customs duty papers. And the analogy of stealing, I disagree with you politely. It's not quite apt, because it's not stealing. Let's look at it this way, very briefly. If you go to a car dealer to purchase a vehicle, whose responsibility is it to ensure that the car dealer
original?
Yes, original. It's not your business to go and be saying, look, did you pay customs duty on this? How did the vehicles get through the borders in the first instance? You have them at the ports, you have them at the borders. Oh, they say the borders are porous. So is that now the rationale for you to be holding up people on the street and say, look, show me your custom papers?
But they might not also be out of place for an intending buyer to also take a step ahead to verify.
You have the responsibility to ensure that
Not to verify,
transactions
yes.
There's no way you can verify.
That is why I use the analogy of exploding property. Anyway, let's not overthink
All right,
that.
so let's go over to the Daily Trust newspaper to take other headlines. That's below the nameplate. Bauchi Emir suspends Waziri Bello Karfi. Details of that story can be found on page 4. Restore confidence in judiciary. Oshibajo tells CJN on Oven. That's on page 3 in greater detail. Now, the lead story of Daily Trust, of course, occupies about 2/3 of the front page. It says AUGF, that stands for the Auditor General of the Federation. That's the kicker. 17 ministries failed to account for 24.3 billion naira. And this, of course, is arising from the 2015 annual report of the Auditor General, which was tabled on the floor of the Senate last week. And then you have the sidebar there indicating the various ministries and the amounts that they were alleged not to have fully accounted for, according to the Auditor General of the Federation. Power, Works and Housing, 9.2 billion. That's the largest sum you find there. Labor and Employment, 84.7. Niger Delta, 1.9 billion. Finance, 22.103 million. And then Youth and Sports, you also have 1.44 billion. And now they also say that's a blank there that says misappropriations according to ministries between January and December 2015. That's the sidebar. The story jumps to page 5. Now, ignore call to postpone trips to the United States. This according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Details on page 3. And stock market, that should not be there. Stock market posts 189 billion gain, biggest in 6 months. And why we named estate after Tinubu? That's according to the governor of Borno State, Shotima. Details on page 35.
Kingsley, that story on the U.S. travel warning, it's a lead story. It's a headline story on the front page of the Nigerian pilot. And this is how it is couched. U.S. travel warning. Foreign minister at war with presidential advisor. Dabiri Erewa's directive stays diplomatic row. Well, Bayo, I think I'll just let you to talk about this because the headline itself, it's frightening.
Well, diplomatic rows are not fought on the pages of the newspaper. I think the sanity has maintained, information was given, and the ministry that is in charge of that aspect of our relations, bilateral relations, has now said that you are free to travel to the United States. Meanwhile, the earlier report that Kingsley read relates to the report of the Auditor General of the Federation. My puzzle there is that even the Federal Ministry of Finance is also involved. It relates to the audit report covering January to December. Also, at the House of Representatives, the House of Representatives Committee on Financial Crime is also to ensure that it's going to audit seizure of assets that are alleged by corrupt instances by the Economic and Financial Crime. The House Committee is to look at the revenue that has been yielded and ought to have yielded resources to the National Treasury. Some of them, according to them, are being left to rust. Meanwhile, the audacity of criminality has been exhibited by kidnappers who are demanding a ransom of 20 million for daring to abduct a divisional police officer in Delta State. The PPRO says they are on their trail and will be arrested.
Okay, just we've finished, Bayo.
Okay.
But I'd just like to point this out. NNPC subsidiary spends $11 million US on staff transfers, vehicles, maintenance. Now, details of that is on page 6. It's on the front page of Blueprint. There are other stories on that paper that, of course, will catch your attention. And just to also add that today is International Women's Day. And so I send my greetings and I doff my heart for all Nigerian women, especially those of you who bend backwards to keep the family. Kingsley.
All right,
Happy
so that does it
Wednesday.
for our This Part Review segment. Bayo Atoyobe, we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, and happy Women's Day to Claire and our compatriot sisters around the nation.
All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be dealing with what appears to be another toxic waste dump at Koko, that's a port town in Delta State.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Security so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogeruola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with
When Ogenekume Pillar Egona was just 6 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer of the bone.
When I bumped my leg, I started to feel better, but my parents told me it was cancer.
I was shocked because it's something I couldn't imagine.
Her parents had to make a choice that would affect their daughter's future forever.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntapeak2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
All right, time for us to set the ball rolling with our conversation. You know the topic, and as of course we asked earlier on, is Cocoa Town in, of course, Warri North local government area of Delta State under threat of inappropriate waste management yet again? Let's listen to Ngozi Chude's background report.
Toxic waste is any material in liquid, solid or gas that can pose a threat to public health or the environment. So for Koko community in Warri North local government area of Delta State, this was not what they bargained for when an Italian company claiming residual chemicals and raw materials for fertilizer dumped about 1,070,000 metric tons of toxic waste behind the compound of one late Sunday Nana in 1988. What followed next was an unprecedented body harm to the people, which include failing sight, stomach upset, and persistent headache. As expected, the outrage under the then government of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida shook the fabric of the entire country. Consequently, this prompted the formulation of a national policy on the environment, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency in 1988 FEPA, which was created and charged with the administration and enforcement of the environmental law. In addition, the government enacted the Harmful Waste Special Criminal Provisions Act 1988 to deal specifically with illegal dumping of harmful waste. 28 years later, cocoa communities in the news again for the same thing it experienced in 1988 as it accused one Warri-based company of dumping toxic waste harmful to residents, plants, and aquatic animals. The Shakiri Environmental and Human Rights Group, who revealed this, added that as the rains come, the likelihood of the borehole water, which is the major source of drinking water, becoming contaminated is inevitable. Following this, the House of Representatives has raised a motion on the floor of the House to investigate the alleged dumping of the toxic waste and the extent of its environmental impact on the community. To this end, a laboratory analysis will be conducted to ascertain the toxicity of the waste. What will be the outcome of this analysis? Why the reoccurrence of this act, and what is the way forward for the people of Cocoa in Delta State? These and more will be the focus today on Good Morning Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much, Ngozi Chude, for that background report. Of course, we have a number of guests with us this morning to discuss this issue in greater depth. Now, we have with us a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. He's a lawyer as well as an environmental expert, Dr. John Osonwa. A pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, and then we also have with us in the studios this morning the Director General of the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, NOSDRA, is Mr. Peter Idabo. Mr. Idabo, a pleasure to have you with us on the studios.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good morning, Nigeria.
And I'm still with us here in the Abuja studios, Mr. Tunde Molahin, again, another environmentalist and architect also by training. Mr. Molahin, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Kinsley, and good morning, Nigeria.
And from our Port Harcourt studios, we have another familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, an environmentalist, also an architect, Nimo Bassey. Mr. Nimo Bassey, a pleasure that you joined us from Port Harcourt.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
All right, sorry, let's contextualize this conversation by pulling back some 29 years ago when the cocoa incident number 1 occurred, assuming there is a second incident now. Mr. Nimo Bassey, could you just refresh the memory of viewers what happened in cocoa in 1988 and what were the immediate outcomes of government intervention?
Thank you very much. It's really sad indeed that we're having an incident that is drawing attention to cocoa on a wrong footing one more time. When in that 1988, the toxic dump from Italy was found in cocoa, the initial response was that these were harmless. I remember one of the residents of cocoa saying in those days that he could even drink water from the containers that the toxic waste were delivered in, and that everything was safe. And of course, we do know that the impacts were dramatic and very, very harmful. But I think the response of the government was quite good, because as your background report noted, it was at that time that we began to pay attention to environmental issues in Nigeria. That's when we had the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which eventually became the Federal. We had the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which is now the Federal Ministry of Environment. It was also at that time that toxic waste regulation and laws were put in place. But you know, the sad thing is that cocoa was just a high point of the impunity that we've seen in the environment. We still have. Cocoa is now another high point again, bringing our attention to this issue. But along the line, we still have very serious issues of environmental pollution, especially from the oil and gas sector.
All right, Mr. Nimo Bassey, let me again quickly ask you, between then and now, do you think that we have compromised on, of course, our waste, management regulation?
Well, what I would say is that our waste management is still very rudimentary. Take the example of solid waste management, simple household waste and waste from our markets and from offices, from hospitals. These are things that could easily be separated and desegregated and dealt with, either converted to other uses or properly disposed in landfills that are properly engineered and constructed. But we still find that our waste are being disposed of very casually. Along highways, in borrow pits, wherever there's a hole, any kind of waste is dumped into it. And our water bodies, underground water is challenged regularly. And as I said, in the oil and gas sector, the regulation, I mean, we have the Director General of NOSRA right in the studio, so I'm sure he will speak more about this. But the pollution that we're having from the oil sector particularly includes not just the oil spill that is so visible and regular, not just the gas flare that we see every day, but the contaminated water that is the product of oil production. Hundreds of thousands of barrels of this toxic water goes into our environment regularly, more or less on a daily basis, because for every barrel of oil, you're having several barrels of this kind of water being produced. Now, this water is supposed to be contained, treated before being disposed to the environment, to our water bodies, but the question is that being verified? Is that being done adequately?
All right, Mr. Nimo Bassett, thank you very much. Let's come back to the Abuja studios here, Mr. Tunde Molahi. Again, looking back to 1988, it wasn't as if the ships that brought in the toxic waste into cocoa were immediately apprehended when they landed. The toxic dumps were already there in the various drums, and Chief Sunday Nana himself, was walking around his land. He eventually died, by the way. What did that say about our consciousness about the environment? And of course, if you recall, it took Nigerian students in Italy to alert the Nigerians to what has been dumped right in our backyard. So what exactly did that say about our consciousness of the environment? And have we moved from that relative ignorance now to be aware of how our environment is being damaged and degraded?
Yeah, talking about advocacy, talking about knowledge, talking about awareness, then it was very weak. We can say that we have really improved, but not there yet. It's instructive to note that at that particular point in time when the whistle was blown by the students, even the embassy in Italy Nigerian embassy was not even aware until the students blew the whistle. That shows a lot in terms of successive attention to issues of an environment, which I classify as grossly, successively inadequate and, of course, embarrassing, despite some modest showings in the last few decades. Having said that, the challenge we have in this country is unfortunate that now that the Buhari administration is getting it right with the Ogoni issue, and we are making progress. This is happening again. I mean, like you said, it's cocoa again. It's sad. It's a sad metaphor, so to speak. I think we have to look at our legislations and enforcements. They're very weak, even our laws. I mean, the NOSDRA DG is here a few years ago. I think the Senate President convened a stakeholders conference to look at NOSDRA Act, I think, and several contributions were made. I don't think we have gone further than, as I was asking you, you were telling me a few minutes ago that you're trying to pay a courtesy visit to the president. I think he should be able to do something. If, as a president, as a member of the National Assembly, was able to convene that meeting at that point in time, now we expect something more comprehensive. So the problem we have in this country is that successively we haven't really done much. On paper, yes, but in terms of action, even in the states, we don't have EPAs, we don't have environmental protection agencies that are very, very efficient. Only you can mention Lagos or maybe one or two, but the challenge we have in this country is that we don't have many states, and even at the center, the laws are weak and legislation. Poverty is an endemic problem that has affected the environment and even because people would try to address their rate of poverty, and while some people will also address their different levels of greed. And that's exactly what actually happened in cocoa so many years ago. Incidentally, it's about 30 years, isn't it? And we are looking at another calamity. I mean, even though it's yet to be, I think, yes, I mean, I think we heard more from Sir Idabo a few minutes time. But of course, the National Assembly is taking steps to address the issue. 4 weeks time, we know, I mean, their stance on that. And I think Sir Idabo is on a visit to that place shortly, and we'll find out what is really happening. But basically, I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge which actually, must be addressed concretely. And honestly, if it is possible to use this case as as a template to address in fuller manner, fuller approach, the challenges facing the environment in the country, it won't be an understatement.
All right, thank you, Tunde, for your comments. Now, let's get back to, since you have thrown the ball to the court of Mr. Idabo, and Mr. Idabo, cocoa again. Now, the responsibility, or part of the responsibilities of Nostra is, of course, is to provide advisory, or advice, on, of course, harmful, waste, and, of course, preferred methods of disposal. Now, with regards to what is happening in cocoa, what information do you have right now?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think at about December 3rd last year, the NMPC and PPMC, in their jetty in Escravos, commissioned a company to remove wastes from their tank 104. The tank usually contains crude, and over time there's usually a sedimentation of what we call sludge. So this company, Ebenco Global Links Nigeria Limited, was commissioned by the NMPC, PPMC to evacuate this waste to cocoa in Warri North local government area, and then treat the waste adequately. Apparently, over 8,000 cubic meters of this sludge was to be transferred beyond the carrying capacity of that company. I think that's the major thing, because over time, this company has actually been doing that, with the NMPC. But in anticipation of the rainy season, because I summoned the managing director of the company, and he said he was given the job in anticipation of the impending rains, and of course the area where these wastes were kept in the NMPC facility, could be subject to overflow. So they commissioned these people to transport this consignment to cocoa.
We understand from what we have heard that a consignment or whatever, has been buried in about 4 acres of land. Now, with regards to the weight, what are the implications?
Yeah, the implications are far-reaching, just like the previous speaker has said, and what Inimo Batsi also said, because it's about engineering of the dump sites. If the place is properly lined with impervious material, you could store them, temporarily before treatment. But apparently, this man got an overload, like I said, of this consignment, and then moved away from his jetty where he normally stores this thing to a virgin land where he now excavated. When I interviewed him in my office, he said, because I wanted to know if the place was properly engineered, and he could not come up with satisfactory.
And you have investigated this?
Yes, well,
that this actually happened?
Yes. He admitted, he did not deny. He said that he dug 3 pits in the place, and was able to, do some concrete works in 2 of them. But the 3rd one, he used ordinary, material similar to tarpaulin, which is totally unacceptable. Because cocoa is a place where the water table is very high, and the place where he chose to dump this is adjacent to a primary school, where children are abstracting water, drinking water for small children. So it was, terribly hazardous, because this sludge actually contains a lot of toxic materials. Not radioactive, though we cannot ascertain that until after the tests, are carried out. So there was a big fault, a very serious, infringement of the laws. Because first of all, I wanted to know if he took permission. If you are going to a new site, you should ask for clearance from the regulators, which he failed to do. He just went in there and apparently, it took more than he can chew, and then wanted to, maybe make some quick, money, maybe by, trying to manage everything by himself. So for me, the solution is that it should take all those things back into those containers where they came from, and mitigate the environment, clean it up under the supervision of NOSDRA.
I think we'll get to that. Kingsley.
I'm just wondering, excuse me, Director General of NOSDRA, the picture you are painting, it appears that, the company probably just, went into the place, not looking over its shoulders and then started working. Where was NOSDRA?
No, the matter was reported to us.
At what time?
It was reported precisely on the 22nd of February by the Ishekiri Environmental,
human rights
group. So I dispatched my staff from our Warrior office to the site. When they got to the site, even some community members, whose names I have here from Cocoa, were in the team. Instead of going to the B site where he dumped those excess waste, they went to the jetty. And of course, some of the waste were there in the jetty, and they took inventory of what was there without knowledge of the other site. It was when I had a contingent of people from this environmental group. They came to my office with pictures and materials. That put me on alert immediately. So I looked at the reports that came in, and I noticed that it did not cover that second site. So on the strength of that, I immediately summoned the MD of Ebenco, who now, over the weekend, and he was in my office on Monday, and I confronted him.
Sorry.
Issues.
What are the legal steps or processes required of such a company handling, oil waste?
Yeah, first of all, it should be fully registered with NOSDRA, which it is. It's even registered with the Federal Ministry of Environment. We don't have problems.
So you oversight the company?
Yes, he has been doing this. He has been collecting. When you take more than you can chew, that's just what is happening here. If you take small consignments of this, then you will use the thermal desorption to incinerate this waste and treat them, collect the ash and dispose normally. But in this case, there was, I said, over 8,000 cubic meters of this waste was taken at the same time. And I just want to point out at this point here that even the PPMC, they should have gone to inspect where he's taking this waste to, from point A to point B. We have the manifest of the barge that collected, of the vessel that collected this waste from point A to Warri North local government area. The normal sequence would have been for the HSC manager in PPMC to go and inspect the destination of this, then ascertain that the place is properly engineered, like Inimobasi said, and before you allow this, before you sign off the contract.
That didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
Okay. All right, but just very briefly, before we bring in Dr. Osonwa, you'll be talking about 8,000 cubic feet or meters. And some of our viewers will be wondering, what does this mean? Can you, when you see a tanker, let's say for an example, a tanker contains, is it 30 or 33,000 liters? How many tankers would that be if you were to convert it, very roughly?
Well, I would say it's equivalent to about maybe 9 to 10, badges, not tankers this time.
No, the ones that people can recognize. I mean, somebody who has never seen a badge.
No, a badge in the watery environment, is stored by a vessel. So each badge has a capacity of 1,000 cubic meters volume. I'm talking about volume. So I mean, it's very easy.
Kingsley, the report said that this thing was buried in 4 acres of land.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's fine. We're just saying what was buried there, just to, analyze it.
It's quite a significant volume.
Yeah, to say, look, like 10 tankers, everybody recognizes a petrol tanker when you see one. But that's beside the point. Now, Dr. Osonwa, for what you're hearing from the Director General of NOSDRA, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a failure of enforcement, failure of vigilance from the bottom of the chain all the way up. NNPC is implicated here. PPMC is implicated. You also have the local environmental enforcement mechanisms. And I think what you have here is a failure of enforcement and vigilance, a gross failure. Because if NNPC is awarding a contract, there should be some due diligence that goes with the award of that contract. There should be some mechanism to make sure that the person has capacity to do this. It appears it was not done. PPMC didn't do it. Even when he began to evacuate this stuff, nobody went to the site to actually ascertain where it was being kept. And this underscores the point I want to make. Historically, when you see this kind of pollution, it is usually because somebody is trying to make undue profit. You trace back to the Calbert incident where they brought waste from Philadelphia, US, to the shores of Africa. It was because of profit. In the US, to properly store the waste, contain it, it will cost them $2,500 per ton. They paid $3 to the African collaborators. The same thing with the cocoa incident. It would have cost them at least $2,000. They paid, in this case, less than $50 was paid. And Mr. Nana paid the ultimate price for all of this. So when you trace this, the reason this man is doing this is because he wants to make more profit, but he doesn't have the capacity to do the job, as we're seeing. So I think when we begin to dissect this, NNPC needs to be held accountable. PPMC, the actual company that is doing this, also should be held accountable. You also have some level of collusion by the community leaders who deliberately did not want to see what was there. Because
deliberately or neglected to see.
Well, if somebody is digging 4 acres and bringing in sludge into 4 acres, people should see. He has to drive through the community to do that. So why did they go to the jetty instead of the actual site? So I think there's some level of collusion because they are getting money. He's paying them, clearly. Otherwise, they will not be supporting this enterprise. So we need to have, perhaps now that we're beginning to talk about whistleblower issues in our system, we need to also directly apply it to the area of environmental terrorism.
That's why we're discussing this now. And,
yes.
And Dr. Sowa, sorry, before you get to that, I'd like you to give us a picture, because already some part of this sludge, has been buried. Yes. You understand? Now they're saying, okay, you go and excavate and take away. But damage has already been done, hasn't there?
It has. And that's the most critical thing we need to understand. When you deposit this amount of sludge, it permeates into the groundwater level very quickly. And this area, we're already saying the water table is high. So when it gets into the groundwater, anybody digging borehole a mile away from that site is potentially at risk too, because once it gets into the groundwater, it flows beyond what you can see. Now we also have children drinking from the river and water systems. That is going to create a lot of pollution and a lot of harm to these children, because we're talking about toxic substances. They are harmful when ingested. Sometimes even breathing the substances can be nauseous and harmful to humans. Ultimately, it causes cancer, and that is always the problem. Prolonged exposure will cause cancer in children, birth defects, women who are pregnant. So we need to be very, very proactive in containing this.
At this point, can it be remediated?
I think it can if we bring in the right experts to do it. But the people need to be evacuated from the immediate area. Those who have been exposed to this need to be evacuated. We need to do proper medical testing. We also need to do proper analysis of what is there. We're assuming it is only sludge. What if there's some radioactive material? Those ones can last in the environment for 500 years. If you have radioactive material, it doesn't, the half-life is very long, and it can do a lot of damage.
All right, Dr. Sowa, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Nimo Bassey in Port Harcourt, you've listened to the NOSRA DG as well as the other guys here in the Abuja studios. Why does cocoa appear to be an attraction for the dumping of toxic wastes?
What a question, Kingsley. But I think my short answer to that would be that, unfortunately, some communities are just targets for profiteers, and this is a question of environmental justice. If you notice, that kind of waste would not be dumped in a rich neighborhood. It's always in the communities where you have people who are disenfranchised, who don't have a say in what is going on. But I'm happy with the analysis that has been shared on this issue, and it really shows the depth of the problem, because this is just one visible example of the pollution going on in our environment. I'm sitting here in Port Harcourt. Port Harcourt is another example where you see the issue of soot that is also visible. But there are so many other invisible pollutions going on, and our people are having their life cut short. And life expectancy in this region is just about 41 years. So you can imagine what's going to happen to the people in Cocoa area and environs. Now, the other issue I would like to bring up is that we've not mentioned the National Environmental Standards and Regulatory Agency, NESRA. NESRA is the regulatory agency for the bulk of our environment. But unfortunately, the law setting up NESRA excluded the oil and gas sector. And the oil and gas sector sits on the board of NESRA. Now you having vested interest ensuring that our environment is not properly regulated or protected. Because the only body that really regulates in the oil sector is maybe DPR and in the NMPC. So NOSDRA only responds to pollution. But the regulatory agency, that's why the NOSDRA law ought to be reviewed. So either you give NESRA the authority to regulate the oil sector, or you give it to NOSDRA. It cannot be within the oil sector to regulate itself. This is why we're having this kind of impunity going on. And in fact, it is a big problem with the underground water. You know, if the people of Cocoa are in trouble, where do they get drinking water from? Even those who have boreholes, the boreholes are in that area will quickly be contaminated and compromised. And the implication of this, as it is implication in Ogoni, for example, where people with boreholes are getting water loaded with hydrocarbons, that you have to dig much deeper industrial scale boreholes. And this would require much investment from local people, and of course place the burden on the government, which ought to supply our people with potable water.
You've raised the Ogoni issue, and we know that you're also involved. I think we're a member of the Board of Trustees for the restoration of Ogoni land. And one of the quick fixes recommended for Ogoni is the supply of potable water. We will have to discuss all of that to see what's playing out or what should play out in Cocoa. But let's return to Mr. Tunde Molahi here in the Abuja studios. We hear of all this RIA, and so on and so forth, whether NESRA, or whatever name, so-called, and yet, you have rampant and flagrant pollution going on in the environment.
Yeah, there's a lot of laxity, there's a lot of impunity, there's a lot of poverty, and there's also a lot of greed. In my opening statement, I mentioned the issue of people trying to meet their different levels of greed, which is one of the reasons why this is happening all over and over again. Environmental pollution is an incurable disease. It can only be remediated or probably prevented. And over the years, we've been paying lip service to this very important issue. The issue of the environment is something that you can never ignore. But over the years, we've seen a lot of impunity. We've seen a lot of lack of bite. People are not punished. By now, Cocoa should be declared, there should be a state of emergency in Cocoa village. There should be a state of emergency in that place for a very serious country. The vice president, the acting president has been there for how many times now? And this is happening. It is very, very unfortunate. It is something that should be addressed right now, and violators should be punished. When you don't punish violators or abusers of the environment, they continue to perpetuate their acts, whether for greed or for lack of means, which is poverty. So I think this is high time something must be done. It's a rat race. Honestly, everybody wants to, and if you look at it vis-a-vis the conventions, the treaties, the agreements that were signed internationally, even locally, you remember the Basel Convention that came into light in 1992, after the signatures in 1989. It stipulated a lot of things in relation to the gains, vis-a-vis the recycling destinations of the world. And Nigeria is not a recycling destination. So why are they shipping all this stuff? Nemo mentioned the issue of Nesra. I think about 10 years. 2013, Venable-led Nesra, apprehended some exporters of this toxic waste. And they paid huge fines. But what about those ones that were not reported? We have them. Nigerians, it's not only in Nigeria, it happens everywhere. LCD countries, that is the less development countries, and there is battle between the OECD countries and the less developed countries. People want to, they call it toxic colonialism. That's exactly what is going on. And this thing should not continue, especially now that there's a global discourse about inequalities and so many other things. To achieve sustainable development goals in Nigeria, these are some of the issues that limit our chances of getting there. So I think the government of today, the Buhari administration, should wake up. And we need to do more than the ongoing crisis.
Okay, stay with you, Tunde, with regards to what has happened in cocoa. Now, Mr. Dahohe has told us the quantity of excess sludge, 8,000 cubic meters. Dr. Osonwa has told us of the potential massive danger. And Nostra is still saying, look, we are still investigating. And the people are still there.
I'm sorry to say, Sasa Idabo is handicapped, and we must say this on national television. I'm sorry. We need to speak truth to power, and we need to tell ourselves the truth in this country. We are not doing enough as far as environment is concerned, and in terms of legislation, in terms of legislation in terms of enforcement. Some people are not punished when they're supposed to be punished. So for so many years, the Ogoni debacle that we are facing today is as a result of this impunity, the same impunity. Why must we be using one hand to be solving a problem and using the left hand to be destroying it?
Shouldn't an emergency be declared in cocoa right now?
That is what I just said. It should be done right now, because that would be a pointer to the fact that, yes, we are serious about what we're doing. A lot of people have said, Ogoni's case is politics, despite the fact that, yes, in 2013, there was a case in the Dutch court ruled that Shell massively deteriorated the environment in the Niger Delta, and they must pay the price. We know that. Despite that fact, people still believe there is a political issue. Okay. And again, another thing we must do in this country is that environmental issues should become issues of national concern. They should be brought to the forefront of our national issues in this country. We have Green Party in Germany. You don't do anything without the environment in some countries, but in this country, anything goes. There was a documentary recently showing that a company, a multinational institute, is actually, people are living on borrowed time in the community in which they are making billions of dollars. These are issues that are very visible. In Kaduna, the same thing is happening. I don't want to mention names. We have them, we have data, and we see all these things. And in the connivance of most of these communities, they are so-called leaders. They are so-called leaders who are just there by name only. If I must say, they are these people who continue to allow the continuous perpetration of this evil. It's so nauseating.
Well, Tunde, you say Nostra is handicapped.
Yes.
What is his handicap?
It's handicapped because some years ago we gathered together at the National Assembly to see, he was there, and of course I was talking about, the Senate President of today, he was a chairman of the Environmental Committee of the National Assembly. He convened a stakeholders meeting to look at the challenges facing Nostra. But of course today, I would expect the distinguished Senate President to do more than he did at being in a vantage position to look at the challenges facing Nostra. The Nostra and Nestra Act, if you remember, that's why it's because of this laxity and these inadequacies that people are calling for for the bringing back of FEPA. People feel that, yes, then there was more bite in the area of environment, that of course that the Federal Ministry of Environment is in name only. It's there in name only, and nothing is happening. We are talking about even funds. We are not even talking about ecological funds that have been mismanaged by successful governments and something like that. Things were supposed to have been used. How can people be making money from Nigeria and they will be undermining the importance and the sovereignty of the country? It is unheard of.
Well,
it shouldn't be
this
sustained.
one
Well,
is,
we hear of it every day, so it's been heard of. So that it should not be heard of.
It should not. It's something that should be stopped. We've done a lot of theory. We should practice what we have theorized.
All right. Well, Mr. Molaye, just let's pause you in the meantime. Let's, Dr. Osonwa. Yes. Dr. Osonwa, before we come to the DG of Nostra, do we have, in your opinion, an appropriate attitude or the right attitude towards the environment? For instance, taking a look at our legislature, does the legislature feel or act in a responsive manner to issues of environment with the grading of urgency that it requires through the establishment of appropriate committees, through the functioning of those committees? Very briefly.
Well, I can tell you, as an adjunct professor of environmental law, the laws we have on the books are more than adequate. If you were to bring out the volumes of regulations and laws, we have enough, and most of them conform to international standard. The problem is in the degree of enforcement. Our enforcement mechanism is weak. Sometimes it's because of resources. Resources are not provided to the enforcement agencies. Sometimes staff do not have the proper motivation to do what they ought to do. Sometimes there is corruption. Let's be very honest about that. In the system, those who are supposed to enforce would sit somewhere, receive some gratuity or whatever, and not even go to the site to inspect. The leaders of these organizations can only do so much. What I would recommend, we've talked about having a state of emergency declared, a disaster zone. That is the appropriate step. People should be evacuated. But we need to begin to take enforcement seriously. In the U.S., people like this man who has admitted to what he did go to jail.
In such a way.
They go to jail. It's not a fine issue. Then those people who were in the chain of awarding the contract, those in the regime of enforcement, should be fired. Then you also need to look at the polluter pays principle. He pays for the cleanup, he pays for the medical care of those who have suffered, and he pays for continuous remediation and monitoring of this site. That has to happen. By the time you finish, that company will be shut down. Yes. And those who have colluded with him will also face some kind of sanction.
Is this similar to, I mean, a fairly well-known example, Mr. Tunde Molaye, is this similar to what we see with kerosene explosion victims? You know, in the past, you know, there were persons who bought contaminated kerosene from designated filling stations. And, of course, the kerosene was said to have been supplied from official sources. And yet, you know, the oil major or the national oil company suffered no liability.
It is toxic colonialism. I will continue to say this. And Nigerian government is culpable. Our people are also culpable. We have to have a change of attitude. This is not a government of change for nothing. We must do something. We must, because the life of our people are in danger. The lives of our people are in danger. I mean, and if you look at the situation whereby, I tell you something, I used to have a friend who was a public relations practitioner, was a consultant to a multinational company. All he was doing was distributing rice to community leaders. Distributing rice to community leaders, and you know what that means. That was his job, that was his major job. And for so many years, that had been perpetuated. And that's why you couldn't hear, and that's exactly, you had so much in terms of the deterioration of the environment in the Niger Delta. So we need to change our attitude. That is very, very fundamental. We need to understand the fact that, yes, all these things that, most of these toxic waste, right, they bring about a lot of unhealthy situations. Most of these wastes are carcinogenic. They create cancer. And most of these kidney problems that we have these days that were never there before as a result of these kind of unhealthy practices. And they're not best practices at all. In other countries where these things are shipped from, right, there are cases, there are penalties. You remember that, the doctor, you remember that the Basel Convention was as a result of what happened in the Cairn sea waste issue when Americans were trying to ship some ash to incinerate ash from Philadelphia, and they dropped some in Haiti.
We have to pause you here right now because we'll need to take a break. We have, of course, other one or two guests waiting. So, Mr. Tunde Molaye, I would like to appreciate, of course, your contributions, and thank you for being part of our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
Originally, I just carry myself like this. I don't turn agent.
Why has one of the world's friendliest occupations become such a nightmare in the hands of some people?
You be talk of town. Say now you be the latest agent we dey in town now.
Why has the circle of lies become the smartest thing?
You go give me 3 bay first. That one na for consultation fee.
Here.
You give me another 2 bay. Now finding fee we dey call am.
Here.
You give me 1K.
Are we going for excursion?
That one na for the excursion fee. You too sharp.
Professor John Bull, this week's episode of your rib-cracking comedy, Estate Agent.
Come on, this thing wey be like shrine address for inside my hotel. The person wey dey teach me this job, the person you all know. You all what? You all pass me? Where president is there so rock. Now I buy am.
And showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
Okay, sir. You may now go in for your interview.
Thank you. Ah, my shoe. And to think I just bought this very expensive foreign shoe 2 months ago.
So sorry about your shoes. This is why I advise my friends to always patronize made in Nigeria products. See this shoe. It's made in Nigeria and I've had it for 2 years and it's still as good as the day I bought it.
Made in Nigeria products are good quality, and stringent government regulations and certification now mean that goods made in Nigeria meet international standards. Make the patriotic choice today. Buy right. Buy Made in Nigeria.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Are you looking for value or you're in search of nature and splendor all in one place? Here at Chida International Hotel, we define the very essence of life. Our environment offers added value in standard, attitude, and delivery. Our facilities include the very best of everything you can imagine. From a world-class event center to Echo's Restaurant, Wema Bar, Confluence Pool Bar, Pastry Lobby Shop, classy and valet services, IT Center, top-notch saloon, conference and banquet facilities, modern health center, and many more. We're located at Plot 224 Solomon Lao Way, Utako District, Abuja. For more information on your highly distinguished hotel services, call 081 007 18882 and 081 007 18883. Never say value until you've experienced the exquisiteness of Chida International Hotel. Chida International Hotel, preferred by many.
All right, you're welcome back, but if you just joined us, you're watching us live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. This morning, of course, as you can see from the caption on the screen, we are discussing the latest affliction of cocoa community in Delta State. In 1988, the community, of course, played host to toxic materials that were shipped in from Italy, but this time around, the local company is said to have dumped or tried to dispose improperly of sludge and other oil wastes again in cocoa community. We still have Dimo Bassi with us from our Port Harcourt Network Studios and the DG of Nostra here with us in Abuja, and Dr. Osonwa, an environmental lawyer. We signed off Tunde Mola here a moment ago. Now we're being joined by another guest, Dr. Goke Adegoroye. He's a former permanent secretary and also he was a pioneer director general of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which was created on the heels of the 1988 dump of toxic waste in cocoa. Dr. Adegoroye, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now before we pop our first question to you, let's return to Mr. Peter Idabo, the DG of Nostra. You've listened to the various comments that have been made by the other guests other than Dr. Adegoroye with regard to what is said to have happened in cocoa and where liability should be placed, as well as, of course, talking about the poor vigilance and lack of enforcement by all persons along the chain, including Nostra. What's your reaction?
Yes, I just want to make some clarifications. The Federal Ministry of Environment is, as Dr. Adegoroye will know, is well poised to handle issues, in the environment sector. There are two enforcement or regulatory agencies in the ministry. One is Nostra, and the other one is Nostra. Whereas Nostra deals with all other types of pollution, mainly from the industry. NOSDA is specifically, responsible for all pollutions, connected with oil. And again, I just want to say that historically, the cocoa people, have been very much sensitized. And coming from the background of the first dumping of the waste there, you have like the environmental rights group, what you are saying happens all over the country. And I would also like to say that
if they be sensitized, how come we are discussing this now?
Because
this is chapter 2.
The only problem they had was that they observed this thing in December 3. Then instead of reporting the matter outright to us, they waited until February 22nd. They went and carried out their own investigation by themselves, went to the lab, they did this and that, and that created a time lag. I expect them that once they see this type of thing, they should escalate the matter immediately to the regulatory agencies so that we can come in and minimize the damage, that will come to the environment. So, like I was saying, they are doing well. They were able to bring up the matter, but it's very, very important. Just like we have whistleblowers now, you cannot blame the country for people stealing money in the country. It's the whistleblowers now that are trying to bring out. If we could have whistleblowers in the environmental sector, like the Prof has said, it would be good.
Sorry, Mr. Idabo, does NOSDRA see cocoa chapter 2 or cocoa number 2 as an emergency situation? And if so, what are you doing?
Absolutely. The issue there is that we just like these guys went, the environmental rights people went and did sampling. We have to do the same thing. We're just today we are going to the field to do collect samples appropriately and send to the lab. You cannot carry out or come to decisions without analyzing, the content of the sludge. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this thing that happened since last year we could have had results by this time now. So it must take at least 24 days for the lab results to come out, and we must do mitigation. We must make sure that something is done by the company to retrieve this thing back into the containers where they got them from.
Time has been wasted.
Yes, it's been done.
You've already identified the fact that this company had 8,000 cubic meters in excess of what it's supposed to do. Please, let's bring in Dr. Goke Adegoroye. Dr. Adegoroye, what feeling, does this matter evoke in you at the moment?
I almost didn't come because, as you know, for someone like me who put my entire life into the environment in the 90s, hearing now what has happened, especially I've been tracing the development in the environment sector for some time. And indeed, I'm doing a paper right now for one university, and it really makes me so sad. Let me correct the introduction that you made. I was not the pioneer director general. Dr. Evans, I know, was the pioneer director general, but I was the pioneer director of enforcement in FEPA. And later on, I became the director general after Dr. Enon left. Okay. So it hurts. And you really feel that a nation has not moved in almost 30 years. Of course, it's not that we didn't move. What you can call the sensitization and every other thing is there. But the capacity gap that we had then still remains. Here you are, you have the DG in Austria. Today, Moleyin has spoken and has talked about the inability to even have the capacity to do what it should do. It's not that you don't have the numbers. The numbers are there for the human beings that are there because it's skyrocketed. When I was Director General of FEPA, the total number in the agency was 720, including cleaners. And we were more responsive then. But then, over the years, certain gaps where we should put funding, the funding were not properly put there. The thing with the environment issue is that it's a silent killer. It does not really evolve the dramatic vogue that you see. When you see landslides, yes, that is dramatic. But the kind of toxic waste, the kind of thing you are talking about right now, they are silent killers that sometimes can even be masked and be taken to be malaria, to be whatever, whereas actually it's poisonous things that are going on. But the same thing is there. Nostria has been established, but you are talking that even in Nigeria right now, you do not have a properly lined sanitary landfill. 20 years, 30 years later, and yet we have ecological fund, we have all the fundings and so on. We spent about 9 billion to buy stove the other time. And, these are the kind of pain, of the kind of things. So I see Nostria, and I want to really ask, what has changed from the time that I was heading the agency? And now that you even have a different agency for oil pollution control. I mean, when I was heading the agency, we needed to depend on what we call the CNAs, the Clean Nigeria Associates, and up to now, they are still the same people that are helping us. So the polluter is going to be the one to mobilize resources to take you to the site of pollution. So they are the ones who will determine when you get there. You don't have the logistics to be able to do it. Why is it that we spend so much to be able to create paraphernalia of office without actually investing and putting the funds where the funds should go, which is in terms of the mitigation? A lot of the issues that I've been talking about here actually are issues of what we can call the enforcement protocol. I was the one who established what we call registration for consultants, because when FEPA was created, everybody was coming in, I'm an expert. And I said, if you don't know more than me, you cannot be an expert. So we created a process whereby we had to certify and evaluate people who we will call experts and consultants. The whole idea is that whoever we want to send to the environment, it's like we are given our own certificate of integrity that these people can advise, and we can be sure that the advice will not lead to anything untoward for the society. So the key thing will have been when, whether it is a NNPC or whatever, was giving this kind of contract to these people, that kind of chain of contract should have also been sent to the Environment Agency, so that they would have been able to know that, okay, this guy is giving this contract, how much capacity does this guy have? Is he in a position to be able to handle this volume? Does he have the technical capacity to be able to even change and detoxify the waste? If you cannot do that, then you will then be able to advise the agency to say, okay, sorry PPMC, sorry NNPC, I think this thing is really not properly done. You will need to get somebody else who can be able to do that. So these are some of the things that need to be done.
All right, Dr. Adegoroye, thank you. You have talked about some of the things that needs to be done, but let us also look at right now, because the Nostra DG has said that, look, it will take 24 days?
Yeah, it is.
24 days for the results of the investigations to come out. Within this interval, what happens? What should happen? Dr. Adegoroye.
Oh, first of all, the first thing is you need to be able to screen that area and be able to condemn them off. You need to send a lot of sensitization to the people as to what to do in the emergency situation until we are waiting for what shall be the results. And then number two, you now also begin to get in what should be the fallback position, because this thing will have to be removed. Are you going to be able to move it? Because in the real sense, even when you now suppose you get the result and the result now said, yeah, this is contaminated, are you then going to begin to determine how far is it going to percolate down, or are you trying to find out what is going to be the flow pattern or what? Because all of those things also, you need to have those answers right away and begin to now map out how to be able to contain it.
All right, Dr. Adegoroye, thank you very much. There are tweets already from our viewers. We'll take those tweets. But before we go to the tweets, Mr. Nimo Bassi, still in Port Harcourt, I mean, you listened to, again, what Dr. Adegoroye said, and one question to ask at this time, we're dealing with a federal agency. Well, this is not election time, and politicians are not falling over one another in Cocoa area. But is it surprising that there appears to be little noise or little concern from the governments at various levels in the state? Why is Cocoa not hitting the front pages? I mean, we have all kinds of stories on the front pages of other papers.
That's a good question. And unfortunately, most of what people get have gotten to know about what is going on is from social media, which again shows the power of citizens journalism. And of course, what we are doing today is very, very significant. It's unfortunate that we are not hearing actions and steps being taken by the state apparatus to tackle this very, very horrendous situation. And, you know, from the analysis we've heard, unfortunately, not much has changed over the years, and that's just the truth. NOSRA is not fully equipped to be able to respond to situations when they occur, and I do know that I remember when there was the Bonga oil spill, for example, the issue of what was the volume of spill into the ocean was put by the polluter, Shell. They said it was 40,000 barrels, and nobody ever told us was less than that or more than that. So when the polluter determines what is going on, it's very difficult to respond. And students said earlier that the environment ought to be a very highly political issue. Our political leaders should tell us what they think, what they want to do about the environment, because the environment is our life. This is not just a slogan, it's a fact. People are drinking water from the streams. People don't have potable water from the taps in most of our cities or villages. People are just farming and fishing, and you know, you go to a place and you wonder what you are eating, what you are being served with, what you are eating. Is it really something you ought to eat? Is the food safe enough for you to eat? Is fish safe enough for you to eat? We don't have the solution. We don't have the answers to this question just because the environment has been, we just believe that dirty no they kill Africa man. Whereas dirty is lack of sanitation is killing our people. It's affecting our children, it's affecting our mothers, it's affecting everyone. And in fact, pollution is a political issue. Let me just bring up here that some years ago, a chief economist of the World Bank, Mr. Lawrence Summers, said that it makes economic sense to dump pollution in poor communities. That in fact, Africa and some of these other continents are underpolluted. And he went on to say that considering that the life expectancy is low, it's better to dump pollution in communities where people will not live old enough to have prostate cancer than to dump it in communities where people tend to live longer. So you see that this is a question of discrimination against the poor, against the weak. And this is why somebody would just pack 8,000 cubic meters of toxic waste and dump in cocoa. I mean, it's unacceptable. It's incredible. And I do also agree that delaying the act of evacuating that thing, the toxic waste, is also compounding the problems. Because I don't need a laboratory analysis to tell me that any waste from the oil sector is toxic. We all know it's toxic. We're just waiting for the level of toxicity. So what ought to be done right now is, as has been said, block off the area, then begin the process of evacuation. The harm has been done. The issue now is how do we limit or reduce the level of spread of the harm that has been done already.
Thank you.
Mubasi, thanks a lot. Just Dr. Osonwa, I mean, look, it's talking about the polluter, we're talking about the agent, you know, who's also said to have disposed of this sludge. It's strange that we're not hearing from DPR, who is supposed to be the regulatory authority in the oil and gas sector. Of course, NOSRA is here with us and then making his own comments. And then the owner of the sludge itself, the behemoth and NPC.
Well, as I've said, until you begin to get serious about holding polluters accountable, this kind of stuff will continue to go on. This man needs to be incarcerated pending the resolution of this. We don't need to wait 24 days to begin the evacuation. Let us use the highest protocol possible to evacuate to some other place. Because the longer it stays there, it leaches into the ground. We have children close by, very harmful. The other thing I want to stress is we also, as individuals, need to reawaken our consciousness about the environment. The Nigerian culture about the environment is very lax, is very troubling. We throw away refuse, we burn tires, we burn our refuse indiscriminate, and then people complain about persistent malaria and typhoid. World Health Organization tells us over 50% of diseases are directly attributable to the environment. You also look at lifespan. When I was growing up, Lifespan of the Nigerian was over 70 years. Now it's fluctuating between 47 and 50. 41. Now it has reached...
In the Niger Delta, according to Nimo Bass, they run about 41 years.
And that's directly related to the environment. What is going on with our environment? So we need to be really proactive. I don't think we should wait. This is an emergency, and we need to observe the maximum protocol and evacuate. If you are wrong, nobody gets harmed because you went beyond. So let's begin to move as we test for specific components.
Let me just add something. I've already instructed the consultant to proceed immediately and evacuate. You see, the problem that comes to play, especially in the Niger Delta, is the attitude of our communities. You see, if a place is polluted with oil, for instance, or any type of pollutant, you find that the people are they are fixed between getting the compensation and allowing the evacuation of the waste. They will say no, you will not remove it until so. So we people need to be enlightened, Like if the man then goes down to maybe payloaders, because I say if you deploy payloaders immediately, those places that were not properly lined, you should excavate and return to the containers. There are over 20, this type of containers they use at the port terminals. That's what they use to convey those waste. So they should put them back. But I expect that maybe there will be some resistance again from the communities.
Yeah, why don't you call it the law enforcement agents?
Well, sometimes it complicates the
It shouldn't
situation.
complicate it.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
people should be
for them to start
people like Nimo Basi are working hard to create that enlightenment. Well, this is one of the obstacles I'm trying to make clear to you, that this is what happens in the field. People use shovels to direct oil into their property. Once they see the pollution coming, they quickly run into the house, get implements, and start directing the thing into their property.
Well, Mr. Idabo, it is also the people that have raised this alarm. So we must also acknowledge and give them credit, for bringing this up. Otherwise, the regulatory agencies, it's kept your radar.
I'm just telling you that even as we speak now, you will find some people who will tell you, look, this man is employing 110 staff from our community.
Okay, let's
the community needs to be, Mr. Idabo, the community needs to be alive. And just we said that we have tweets already. And just to indicate, Dr. Osman, while you were talking about burning tires, a couple of weeks ago, the Customs Service made a show of having seized some 2 million used tires or fake tires imported from China. We do not know what has happened to those tires, whether they've been incinerated or whether they've been buried somewhere in the desert parts of the country. So Dele Jack Solomon has this tweet. Allegations that samples of the waste had undergone a series of scientific tests which proved that the waste is highly toxic.
And Sani Michael Omakuji, I've been following Observer newspaper on this matter, and it's very glaring that some government officials are involved in this heinous act.
Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet. The state government should wake up from its slumber and do something about the toxic dump to protect humans, animals, and plants in cocoa area. And
I think we have Dele Jack Solomon. Tweets, cocoa is vulnerable. We therefore call on the federal government to intervene in order to prevent a recurrence of the 1988 incident.
Well, Dele Jack Solomon has another one. Action should be taken because as the rain comes, surface and underground water, which are the major sources of drinking potable water, become polluted. So those are the tweets here that we have in the meantime. But let's return to Dr. Adegore. Dr. Adegore, do we have the capacity, although not say we now, but not NTA is not part of that. Do the appropriate agencies have the capacity to mobilize for an emergency response to what you guys have identified on the program this morning?
The answer is no.
Okay.
Whether in Nasria or Nesria, the answer is no. Absolutely. The staff are there. They've got some training. They are under-engaged, under-equipped, and under-resourced. And when they want to do the right thing, where will it go? We are talking about here that you need to be able to have, government itself should have been the one to invest in having a proper sanitary landfill in virtually all of the zones. Years ago, Government went into saying that they were going to have incinerator in all of the zones in Nigeria. We don't know what has happened to it. You need to tell me whether any one of them is functioning right now. So, and it's the same thing with this. So the proper thing need to be done, because you are not going to be able to have private people who will come. Government needs to come to bring in the seed money first. And then when they know that your enforcement is going to allow them to be able to generate the funds by what you'll be charging for those, what we call tipping fee, those who go to tip into those areas, only then will private people be able to invest in them. Doctor here mentioned, that in United States, it's actually about 3,000 to be able to recycle and detoxify this. But then for us here now, if they say they want to pay you $10 now in Nigeria is about 4,000 per ton. So that's a lot of money. So this is the real challenge, and it hurts. When I was in environment when I was DG in 1997, I wrote it in my book. The total capital vote that I was given was 19 million naira. Whereas there was an agency then called Family Economic Advancement Program, FEAP, F-E-A-P. My own was FEPA. FEAP was given about 6 billion, and the environment was not given. And the situation hasn't really changed much till now. So until we commit to doing the proper, funding when we're talking about infrastructure, there must be infrastructure for environment management that government itself should pump money into. Not this thing about giving state governors 2 billion, to go and spend. But
Okay.
Let the money go.
Dr. Adegoria, quickly, we're rounding off now. This question is, I'm taking it from Daily Jackson Solomon's tweets. And he says, cocoa is vulnerable. Well, there's a difference between being vulnerable and being in vulnerable situation, but cocoa is vulnerable. And Kingsley asked this question earlier on. Why is cocoa vulnerable? Are other such designated ports equally vulnerable? Dr. Adegoria.
Oh. First, cocoa is vulnerable because, small light boats and even a big light boat can actually get in there. That's number one. Number two is what is actually being said here, that because there is this mentality of trying to get compensation, that the people themselves will also try to lure things to that place so that they can be able to make some money. But then there is also the issue of the company that also does not really have the capacity to be able to do what it professes to do. So it's all the combination of all of those things that are actually coming in there. I don't want to say, maybe we are lucky this time that it has happened in cocoa, so that it can actually bring the thing back home. That even in an area where you have this kind of thing, 30 years later, it does not mean that you can still have it again. So it does not mean that you are not having it in other areas. It may even be that the awareness in cocoa is what has even brought this one to light.
All right. Dr. Sonwa, briefly.
Yeah, I just want to say that I vary a little bit from what my brother said. I believe the capacity is there. If we don't have enough money from the federal government, what about the state government? This is an oil-producing state, 13% derivation, very rich state, Delta state, and this is affecting the citizens of the state. The state can mobilize emergency resources and recoup from federal government as they do later. The other thing is also with regard to capacity. You can invite experts from outside to augment what you have. And these people can be here within 2 days to help us do the remediation. So where there is a will, there is a way.
All right. Dr. John Osowa, lawyer and environmental expert, would like to thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, we also would like to appreciate Ms. Nibo Bassi, joined us from our Port Harcourt studios. Mr. Nibo Bassi, we appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much. And I think we're going to wake up for all Nigerians to wake up and time to act. No more time.
All right.
All right. Dr. Goke Adegoroye, retired permanent secretary and former DG of FEPA. Again, we thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And the incumbent DG of NOSRA, Mr. Peter Idabo, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that does it for our discussion segment. On Good Morning Nigeria, cocoa again in the news for the wrong reason. Let's move over now to sports. Arsenal walloped 10-2 in aggregate. That's the worst humiliation they have faced in recent years against Bayern Munich in the Champions League last 16 stage. Let's go over now to our sports desk, telling us also about a ride of Real Madrid over Napoli.